listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast, hosted by Zach Bechtold and Matt Franks. We hope you enjoyed today's podcast and check us out online at beardedtheologians.com. You're listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast, hosted by Matt Franks
and Zach Bechtold.
This week, it's the bottom of the ninth, 2 outs. Zach Bechtold up to the plate. And this week, we're going to talk about, we're still in that process of Lent and talking about the social principles. And this one that we're pulling up this week is on the economic community. We understood that as we were putting this together, we recognized that there's no way we could just spend 6 weeks on this alone, and that there's so much out there for us to analyze and look at. And, and so we just kind of decided to hit highlights or just have a general conversation like we would if we were sitting at a coffee table. And so this week we're going to look at the economic community. And the economic community is, we claim all economic systems to be under the judgment of God, no less than other facets of the created order. Therefore, we recognize the responsibility of governments to develop and implement sound fiscal and monetary policies that provide for the economic life of individuals and corporate entities, and that ensure full employment and adequate incomes within a minimum of inflation. We believe private and public economic enterprises are responsible for the social cost of doing business, such as employment and environmental pollution, and that they should be held accountable for these costs. We support measures that would reduce the concentration of wealth in the hands of a few. We further support efforts to revise tax structures and to eliminate governmental support programs that now benefit the wealthy and at the expense of other peoples or persons, depending on your line. Like, as we think about this, and we think about the world that we live in today, one of the things that's been, as we've been talking about this, as I've been working on this, I've been thinking about what Neil said about this is something that the world church should read upon. Mm-hmm. How does that affect your kind of thought on that?
Well, I look at it, and like you say, I think before our conversation with Neil, I would have saw this as a very just American social principle, something that, at least in the Western part of the world, that this is really what it's for, but really accepted by the United Methodist Church. And so how do we live into this, this economic community, this idea that our governments, this idea that our leadership should actually pay attention to people and not just a certain space, for all persons, like this says. And so when we look at the economic community, we look at the various economic structures across the globe, whether it be a Western and a first world economic structure, or even a third world or worse economic structure where it's very much divided by war and just classism and very high degrees of separation between the haves and the have-nots, which we find that a lot here in the States as well. But it seems, because we have the middle class to an extent, there's some gray area there. It doesn't seem so dramatic, but in all reality, it really is that dramatic here of the haves and have-nots. The community that I live in, more than half of the people that live here live under poverty line, and these are good, hardworking, middle-class people. And but many of us work under that poverty line just because that's the economic situation here, and because there's such a disparity. And so as the church, our job is to speak up and say, no, we can't have such a separation. When a few people have everything and the rest of people don't, there's a problem here. And so how do we as a government, how do we as people, how do we as the churches where this is what we're supposed to be, there's some really hard issues there, especially in terms of American understanding of socialism, things like that. They're like, oh, we can't do that. No, that's not what we're saying here. but it's fighting for people to have what they need to survive. And it's not just the basic necessities, it's to have what people need for humanity and dignity to be brought to their lives.
And so as you bring that up, I was thinking, my administrative assistant right now is calling local churches to set up a coalition. We're going to look at putting together a coalition to be able to take care of kids and teachers as the looming, it looks like here in Oklahoma, we'll be going on a teacher strike. And so that means we're going to have a lot of kids that will not have the ability to have a safe place to be and a place to have 2 meals that they get at school. Mm-hmm. And so, as we were reading this, I was really focusing on the global aspect of it, but then just that mm-hmm. whole, in the back of my head, hearing the cry of our teachers here in Oklahoma and our state workers who are, really our teachers are superly underpaid and well deserving of a raise. So they haven't had one in a long time. And so as we challenge our state lawmakers to do the right thing and to, I like this line here. This is the thing that really struck me. We further support efforts to revise tax structures and to eliminate governmental support programs that now benefit the wealthy at the expense of other persons. That line just really hit me for what I'm going through right now in Oklahoma. And even in Oklahoma, one of the things that I share with people when I meet with people the first time is like, I live in one of the poorest counties in Oklahoma, which when you put it on a larger scale really puts it at a high poverty level for mm-hmm. The country. And so and that's just it's a whole mess of things, and so I think that if we can support and encourage and work towards maybe finding a place where people can live in a healthy means to be able to make all their to not kill themselves trying to work. That's one of the things mm-hmm. that I know that the United Methodist Church in its early days was a huge fighter for. And we were really big on that. And I think that we can go back again on that and really try to do the right thing. And it's funny when you look through those and see which ones are part of the things. It's really kind of interesting to see what the subheadings are, and would encourage everybody to look at those and remember, like, the whole idea is call to action, but then also realize that a lot of these you may not agree with, but understand that this is from a global aspect, but then also it has implications for us. And what does that mean for us to live within mm-hmm. these, within this covenant of the social principles?
Right. And just for what it's worth, in a little bit of research, the poverty line for a family of 5 is $28,000, a little over $28,000. So to be above that's not a lot of money. And there are certainly there's certainly a lot of people in our communities across the country and especially across the world that's just the United States poverty line, but still, that's not a high number. It's not. And how do we begin as a church to speak out and make, and like you say, man, that line of the rich getting richer at the expense of everyone else, how do we as the church stop that, and help that come back down into the rest of people? It's huge. And you're right, teachers are a prime example of that, because one of the most underpaid and underappreciated jobs, careers, people that we need and value deeply, and go into into our communities where poverty is an issue, and they don't have the best gear and the best tools, and yet they're doing the best that they can to teach our kids to be the best adults they can.
And I think one of the ideas in the subheadings of these social principles is consumption, and I'm thinking about mm-hmm. So next week for Holy Week, y'all, we encourage you to listen and share, because we have Shane Claiborne on, and mm-hmm. Shane does a good thing. Shane's doing some amazing work, and one of the ideas of consumption, Shane kind of hit on that a little bit. If we, think about our consumption and what we consume, mm-hmm. and I've been thinking about that a lot lately. One of the challenges I've had for Lent, for our congregation, and I know a lot of congregations do it, is those little packets that you put the quarters in and, that sort of thing. And thinking about what does that mean? For me, it's one less cup of coffee, or, the $15 equals out to one meal out a week. What if I could make that sacrifice and pour that money that I would use for that into something else, for something good? And I think that that's a huge thing when we start thinking about that and really looking at ourselves, and asking ourselves, what are we using our money for? And I think about this line that I was preaching on Sunday when I was talking about money. It just happens to correlate. I mean, this is not planned. This is correlated this way. But there was a story that I told that this pastor was telling the story about, you can't take it with you, and that parents, you should give your kids your inheritance now, so you both could enjoy it together. And a young family had their parents there that Sunday, and they were just there to guest visit. And the parents left, and later on, this pastor received a thank you note from that young family saying, thank you for that sermon. We call this your $6,000 sermon because our parents sent us $6,000 out of their inheritance for them to have extra. And I think about that, and I think of, we all have something to give to this world. And, some of it is finances. Some of us can't afford to do some things, and some of us can afford to, do great work with our money. And some of us can actually get down and get dirty. And,
right.
And I think, as I think about this call to action, I think that that's what it is. How are you using your time and your talents and your abilities to make a difference in this world? And
you talk about consumption, and I think something we forget about consumption. We talk about materials and food and money and things. We consume all of these things. When I was working on my undergrad in business, I was able to write from the perspective of the church and not a church setting. And in talking about consumption, from the business standpoint, it is materials, it is finances. We do consume those things very much in business, but people become a commodity. People become something that businesses and corporations and anybody that uses people in employment, we consume them, and they become this tool and this resource that people tend to abuse and say, well, if you won't do the job, I'll go get somebody else. There's somebody else out there. And that leads to poor wages, that leads to poor work environments and things like that. And people become a consumable. And when we talk about the economic community in all of these facets, whether it be how we pay folks, how we treat people, what we consume in this world, we can't forget that we're fighting for people within this consumption as well, to not let people be consumed by employers, by corporations, by factories, by all of these things, and be mistreated and used up and then thrown out to have the next batch of people come in and done the same thing with. And that happens a lot here, but that happens a lot to their companies to pay lower wages and things like that. And that's something that we have to pay attention to as well within this.
And so we want to encourage you to continue the conversation and think about the economic community. And we read it to you. You can find that online. Just Google social principles, United Methodist Social Principles, the economic community, and read everything that they have on their website. You can actually order the book from, Cokesbury or Amazon. Or if you're really cool and you have a book of discipline, it's in the book of discipline. Mm-hmm. But we want to encourage you to continue that conversation, because I think it'd be really cool for you all to keep that, look and see what some of those subheadings are and wrestle with some of those subheadings. Some of them are kind of interesting to read.
They are.
And some of them are, easy, and some of them are, I don't think I can go there. And right. So we want to encourage you to think about that and, continue this. We're thankful for all that you all do for us and listening and providing feedback, because that's what gives us go juice.
Go juice.
And so
let's put that on a shirt.
Yeah, give us go juice. That might get us into trouble. But, we thank you for our listeners, and, go on our website. We got some great stuff out already. We've had some good blogs on regards to this social principles conversation. We've had some really great podcasts the last few weeks in regards to this. I'm really looking forward to sharing with you next week when we had Shane Claiborne on. And then we've had some other really great guests on that we're going to have down the road.
April's got some good guests.
April's a good catch of our breath for us, because we'll have that downtrod of Easter and mission trips and all that stuff. And so we give you thanks for all that you do, and just continue to give us more stars. And I noticed that we had 6 5-star reviews on Facebook or on Apple iTunes, and that's really a great thing. Out of the 6, I don't think any of them other than your wife and I actually had something written on there. So just go ahead and just like us 6 times, give us 5 stars, like us 6 times, and then just bash the crap out of us. We just want the 6 stars. So
that's right.
So for the Bearded Theologians, I'm Matt Franks.
And I'm Zach Bechtold. Thanks for checking us out.
Thank you for listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast. We hope you've enjoyed listening, and we hope that you share our content online through Facebook and social media, and we hope that you check out our Beardcast store at beardedtheologians.com and pick up some great Bearded Theologians gear. We hope you have a good day.